In the bustling heart of a medieval town, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread and, unfortunately, the occasional whiff of something far less pleasant, the subject of waste management was as contentious as a knight's tournament. Picture this. It's a bright Tuesday morning, and Sir Reginald the Roaming, a knight renowned not just for his gallant deeds but also for his unfortunate proclivity for overindulgence at feasts, finds himself in dire straits. As he waddles toward the village garderobe, a glorified toilet perched precariously over a pit and adorned with a questionable tapestry of some long-forgotten heroic battle, he bumps into Brother Bernard, a monk notorious for his dietary indiscretions, particularly his love for beans. "Ah, Sir Reginald. You look rather flushed. Perhaps a bit too much ale at last night's revelries?" Bernard chuckles, his own stomach rumbling ominously as he gestures toward the rickety wooden door with a look of mischief. Inside, the lack of privacy is a shock to the system. The garderobe is merely a wooden bench with holes, surrounded by a wall that offers little more than a suggestion of modesty. Sir Reginald settles himself, grimacing at the thought of the village gossip. Especially from Lady Agnes, the nosiest noblewoman who had a habit of eavesdropping. Meanwhile, Bernard is outside, experiencing a symphony of digestive distress that could rival a dragon's roar. Just then, a clumsy squire named Hubert stumbles in, tripping over his own feet and sending a chamber pot flying like a poorly aimed catapult. The resulting splatter is an explosion of chaos, as Hubert yelps in horror and Reginald, caught mid-experience, lets out a yelp that could wake the dead. "By the king's trousers!" Reginald exclaims, his dignity now lost to the winds of misfortune. "What manner of sorcery is this?" Hubert, red as a ripe tomato, scrambles to apologize while Bernard, sensing the commotion, decides to join in, only to misjudge the distance to the garderobe and land in an unfortunate position. Laughter erupts, echoing through the streets as the townsfolk gather, peering in with a mix of amusement and mild disgust. Thus unfolds a tale not just of medieval sanitation, but of the delightful absurdities that arose in a time when the art of hygiene was a mere footnote in the grand tapestry of life. A tale that proves laughter, much like waste, is best shared. Setting the scene in the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages, often romanticized for its gallant knights, fair maidens, and towering castles, was a time when life was typically less than glamorous, especially when it came to matters of sanitation. Imagine strolling through a bustling town square in medieval England, where the air is filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, mingling awkwardly with the unmistakable scent of, well, let's just say the less savory remnants of human existence. For all the chivalry and courtly love, the realities of waste disposal were anything but noble. In this world, laws against tossing waste onto the streets were as scarce as a clean pair of socks. Instead, townsfolk relied on a haphazard system of garderobes, primitive latrines that often jutted out from the side of a castle or a manor, offering a precarious perch over the moat. A nobleman would, of course, have the luxury of a private garderobe, while the common folk made do with chamber pots and the occasional trip to the communal toilet. In some places, it was even customary to hurl one's waste out into the street. A practice that surely added a new meaning to the phrase, "watch your step." But enough about the general state of hygiene. Let's dive into the quirky world of medieval sanitation through the eyes of our protagonist. Sir Reginald of Wobbleshire, a knight with a peculiar penchant for misadventure, and his not-so-esteemed squire, Bertie, who had a knack for finding trouble, particularly when it involved the local garderobe. Sir Reginald stood at the entrance of Wobbleshire Castle, peering into the misty morning. His stomach gurgled ominously, a sound not unlike the growl of an angry bear. "Bertie," he bellowed, "fetch me my chamber pot. The fate of the kingdom may depend on its timely delivery." Bertie, a gangly lad with more enthusiasm than sense, scampered off, nearly tripping over the castle's drawbridge in his haste. As he fumbled with the pot, Sir Reginald eyed the nearby garderobe, envisioning a much grander throne than the one that awaited him. "Your Grace, might I suggest the garderobe instead?" Bertie called, a hint of mischief in his voice. "The view is splendid, and you might just feel like a king." Reginald mused for a moment. It had been a long time since he'd experienced the fresh air wafting through the wooden slats of the garderobe. A bit too fresh for most, but he fancied himself a man of adventure. "Very well, lead the way, my faithful squire." As they approached the garderobe, they stumbled upon Brother Elmer, the monastery's resident monk, in the midst of a very serious discussion with a flock of bewildered chickens. "You see, brethren," Elmer lectured, "the secret to divine digestion lies in the balance of lentils and prayer." "Indeed, brother," Sir Reginald interjected, "but I fear I might explode before I can partake in your heavenly beans." "Lentils, you say?" Bertie chimed in, attempting to balance the chamber pot precariously on his head. "Is that what causes the disturbances?" "Silence," Reginald commanded, clutching his stomach. "I must relieve myself." As they reached the garderobe, Reginald realized a grave mistake had been made. The door was ajar, revealing a rather embarrassing sight. A noblewoman, Lady Edwina, ensconced in her own world of discomfort. "Oh, dear heavens! Cover your eyes, you ruffians!" she shrieked, frantically trying to fasten her skirts. "Your Grace, we were merely searching for a place to," Reginald stammered, but it was too late. The noblewoman, in her panic, flung her chamber pot out the window just as a passing peasant happened to be walking by. "Curse the heavens!" the peasant yelped, dodging the onslaught of waste. "What manner of divine retribution is this?" "Not retribution, dear fellow, just a misunderstanding," Reginald called, trying to salvage some dignity. As the noblewoman retreated in embarrassment and the peasant swore revenge upon the castle, Reginald and Bertie found themselves doubled over with laughter. "Perhaps we should stick to chamber pots after all," Bertie suggested, his eyes sparkling with mischief. And thus concluded another day in the medieval world, where sanitation was as unpredictable as the weather and the only certainty was that the next adventure, much like the next chamber pot, was always just around the corner. As the sun dipped low over the ramshackle rooftops of Wobbleshire, Sir Reginald found himself in yet another predicament, one that was decidedly less noble than his title might suggest. The evening's festivities had taken a turn when Brother Bernard, the monk with an insatiable appetite for beans, had roped him into a game of jest and jibe. "Reginald, my good man, you must join me for a round of who can hold it the longest," Bernard exclaimed, his voice booming over the clattering of plates. Little did they know, the contents of the garderobe were plotting their own chaotic rebellion. Just as Sir Reginald was about to retort, Hubert, his hapless squire, stumbled through the door, clutching a chamber pot like a prized goblet. His foot caught on a loose cobblestone, sending the pot, along with its dubious contents, flying across the room. The result was a symphony of gasps, laughter, and the unmistakable squelch of misfortune. Lady Edwina, who had just entered, found herself in the unfortunate position of being doused in the remnants of what one could only hope was last week's supper. "Reginald! What manner of barbarism is this?" she shrieked, her face a portrait of horror and indignation. "Merely a splash of history, my lady," he stammered, desperately attempting to salvage his dignity as the room erupted in uproarious laughter. In that moment of chaos, Sir Reginald realized that even in the darkest corners of medieval sanitation, humor thrived like the weeds in the castle courtyard. As he helped Lady Edwina to her feet, he couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. After all, in a world where the garderobe was both throne and tomb, laughter was the best remedy for the stench of life's little surprises. A noble's throne or a peasant's plight? In the heart of a bustling medieval village, the sun shone brightly over thatched roofs, illuminating the chaotic dance of daily life. Amidst the clamor of livestock and the scent of fresh-baked bread, a rather pressing matter loomed like a dark cloud: the elusive art of relieving oneself. Welcome to the not-so-honorable world of the Garderobe, where privacy was as scarce as a warm bath. Lord Reginald, a nobleman with an inflated sense of self-importance and a waistline to match, was in a particularly foul mood. He stormed into his castle, his silk robes billowing behind him like an angry storm cloud. "Have the chamber pots been emptied?" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the stone corridors. "I won't have my esteemed guests subjected to the foul stench of last week's feasts." Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Squire Bertie, a gangly lad with a penchant for tripping over his own feet, was tasked with the unsavory duty of waste disposal. Armed with a chamber pot that looked suspiciously like it had seen better days, and by better days, we mean about a decade ago, he teetered precariously towards the edge of the castle's walls. Just a little more to the left, he muttered nervously, eyeing the village below. What could possibly go wrong? As Bertie leaned over to toss the contents of the pot, he heard a sudden shout from the courtyard below. "Look out!" cried Old Man Harold, the village's resident gossip and self-appointed guardian of public sanitation. He had just spotted Lord Reginald's imminent cascade of waste and raised his arms in a futile attempt to warn the unsuspecting villagers. But alas, it was too late. The contents of the chamber pot soared through the air like an ill-aimed catapult, splattering down upon the unsuspecting townsfolk below. The chaos that ensued could only be described as a medieval mayhem of epic proportions. Women shrieked, children cried, and men cursed with all the eloquence of a well-versed bard. "Bertie! You clumsy oaf!" Lord Reginald roared, his face flush with indignation. "This is why I never let you handle anything important." He pointed an accusatory finger at the squire, who was now attempting to hide behind a barrel of apples, hoping to blend in with the produce. Meanwhile, Brother Alistair, a monk with a rather unfortunate case of digestive issues, was waddling towards the garderobe, clutching his belly. "Oh dear, not again," he muttered, his face contorted in discomfort. The medieval toilet, a rudimentary wooden seat perched over a pit, awaited him like an old friend. But alas, the only thing waiting for him was a lack of privacy. As he entered the small, dimly lit chamber, he encountered a rather unexpected situation. The garderobe was already occupied by Lady Genevieve, the noblewoman known for her sharp tongue and sharper elbows. "Excuse me, brother, but do you mind?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I require some privacy for my royal business." "Oh, but my lady," Brother Alistair stammered, "I'm in dire need of this facility as well." "Then we shall simply have to share," she declared with a mischievous glint in her eye, as if she were inviting him to a dance rather than an awkward bathroom experience. And so, two of the castle's finest found themselves in an uncomfortable stance, both trying to maintain some semblance of decorum while the air grew thicker with a mix of tension and, well, the aftermath of last night's feast. Outside, chaos reigned supreme as village folk began to band together, armed with pitchforks and a strong sense of indignation. "This is unacceptable," shouted Harold, rallying the townsfolk with the fervor of a revolutionary. "We shall not stand for being bombarded by noble waste." As the mob approached the castle, Lord Reginald peered out from a window, his expression a mix of horror and amusement. "Perhaps I should have enforced stricter laws against throwing waste in the streets," he mused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "A noble's throne should not come with such peril." And so, on that fateful day, amidst laughter, chaos, and a fair bit of misunderstanding, the village learned a valuable lesson about medieval sanitation. When nature calls, sometimes it's best to answer with caution, and perhaps a good aim. In the quaint village of Wobbleshire, where the cobblestones were perpetually slick with the remnants of the day's refuse, Sir Reginald the Brave found himself in a most precarious predicament. It was a fine afternoon, the sun beaming down, and our gallant knight had just finished a rousing game of jousting, which, truth be told, had left him a bit too jostled in the belly. The hearty stew he had relished earlier was now staging an insurrection within him. "Bertie," he bellowed, summoning his hapless squire, who was busy attempting to wrangle a particularly stubborn chamber pot. "Wherefore art thou, my loyal attendant?" Nature calls with a most urgent tone. Just as Bertie stumbled into view, his foot entangled in the very pot he was meant to be carrying, the noble Lady Edwina appeared, her expression a mix of curiosity and horror. "Sir Reginald, what are you doing in such a compromising position?" "Fear not, my lady. I seek but a place of solace," Reginald replied, trying to maintain his dignity while his face flushed a deep crimson. Just then, Brother Bernard, a monk famed for his love of beans, ambled past, clutching his own belly. "You'd best hurry, Sir Reginald. The garderobe is already occupied by Hubert, and last I saw, he was struggling with the remnants of last week's feast." With no time to lose, Reginald darted toward the ancient wooden structure known as the garderobe, a quaint term for the most primitive of toilets, where privacy was merely a suggestion. He flung the door open, only to be greeted by the sight of Hubert, who was firmly wedged between the walls, his face a picture of sheer panic. "By the saints, this is worse than a dragon's lair," Reginald exclaimed, backing out just in time to avoid the flying debris of Hubert's unfortunate predicament. As the two squires tried to untangle the hapless Hubert, Lady Edwina, who had grown increasingly curious, decided to take matters into her own hands. "If only we had a proper toilet," she lamented, shaking her head disapprovingly. "This is barbaric." "Barbaric? My lady, it's a rite of passage," Reginald quipped, suppressing a laugh. "Every knight must face the trials of nature, and today it seems we have a rather formidable opponent." Just then, Brother Bernard burst forward, his face pale. "I must warn you all. The last batch of beans has caused a most unfortunate chain reaction. Quick, to the privy." The air was filled with chaos. Hubert was finally freed, Bertie was still grappling with his chamber pot, and Reginald was desperately trying to keep his dignity intact. They all sprinted toward the garderobe, where the air was thick with the aroma of history, and not the pleasant kind. In a flurry of limbs and laughter, the four of them tumbled into the small space, each vying for the single rickety seat that had seen better days. The resulting uproar echoed through Wobbleshire, a reminder that even in the most dire of circumstances, laughter and camaraderie could turn the most embarrassing of moments into an unforgettable adventure. As they emerged, each man and lady wore expressions of relief and mirth, the trials of sanitation transformed into tales of hilarity. For in the end, it wasn't the grandeur of the castle or the glory of knighthood that mattered, but the shared laughter and the understanding that even the noblest of souls must face the same fate when nature calls. In Wobbleshire, amid the muck and mire, humor reigned supreme, proving that laughter truly is the best remedy for life's most uncomfortable moments. Chamber pots and clumsy escapades. In the heart of the bustling medieval village, where the sun cast its golden rays over thatched roofs, not all was idyllic. Amidst the joyful chaos of livestock and the enticing aroma of freshly baked bread, there lay a hidden reality that most citizens would rather overlook. The daily struggle of sanitation. It was here that our tale begins, with a clumsy squire named Percival, a man whose escapades were as legendary as his misfortunes, especially when it came to the village's beloved chamber pots. Percival, a sprightly young lad with more enthusiasm than grace, was tasked with a most noble duty that day: to dispose of the chamber pots from the castle. The noble lord had recently decreed that cleanliness was next to godliness, or at least, next to a more pleasant-smelling castle. Armed with a wooden cart and a determined expression, Percival set forth, blissfully unaware of the comedy that awaited him. As he navigated through the narrow streets, the village's residents went about their daily lives, each more engrossed in their own affairs than the last. Old Widow Hargrove was haggling over the price of turnips, while a group of children chased a wayward goat, their laughter ringing through the air. Just then, Percival's foot caught on a cobblestone, and with a yelp that echoed through the alley, he tipped headfirst into a pile of hay. the cart of chamber pots teetering precariously behind him. "By the saints!" he exclaimed, flailing to regain his dignity. But the chamber pots had other plans. With a resounding crash, they toppled over, sending their contents splashing in every direction. The villagers gasped, some in horror, others in amusement, as the squire sat there, a hapless figure amidst the chaos, reminiscent of a bird caught in a storm. Among the onlookers was Sir Reginald, the village's most notorious nobleman, who had a proclivity for sticking his nose into everyone's business. "Ah, Percival, my boy. I see you've taken up a new form of public art," he bellowed, his laughter booming like thunder. Reginald, with his elaborate frilled collar and over-the-top gestures, was always ready to turn a mishap into a spectacle. "'Tis but a momentary setback, Sir Reginald," Percival retorted, his cheeks burning crimson. "I merely wished to enrich the village with a splash of culture." He attempted to rise, but lost his footing once again, slipping on the very mess he had inadvertently created. Meanwhile, Brother Alistair, the local monk known for his questionable digestive issues, ambled by, oblivious to the pandemonium unfolding before him. "What's all this ruckus? A feast, perhaps?" he mused, his nose wrinkling at an unwelcome scent. But then, with the keen sense of smell that only a monk with an affinity for beans could possess, he stopped short, horror washing over his face. "By the heavens, it appears the feast has already been served." As Percival wrestled with the cart, a gaggle of children, emboldened by the spectacle, decided to join in the fun, pelting the squire with bits of hay and laughter. "Look, the noble squire dances with the dung," one cried, and soon the whole village erupted into fits of giggles. But the atmosphere shifted when old widow Hargrove, having grown weary of the antics, shouted, "Enough of this nonsense. Do you lot not know that there are laws against such foul behavior? You'll have the Lord's guards at our doorstep if you keep this up." Her warning, however, fell on deaf ears as the laughter continued to echo through the streets. Percival, realizing the chaos he had created, finally managed to stand and declared with an exaggerated bow, "Fear not, dear villagers. For I shall rectify this situation at once." He grabbed a nearby broom, a rather frail-looking thing, and began sweeping the remnants of his mishap with all the grace of a drunken goose. As the sun began to set, painting the village in hues of orange and pink, what had started as a day of misfortune turned into an unexpected celebration of humor and camaraderie. The villagers, now united in laughter, helped Percival clean up, sharing jokes about chamber pots and the nature of noble duties. Though medieval sanitation practices were far from pleasant, it was moments like these that reminded everyone of the absurdity of life and the bonds forged through shared laughter, even amidst the chaos of chamber pots and clumsy escapades. In the quaint village of Wobbleshire, where the sun rarely shone brightly on the muddied streets, Sir Reginald the Ridiculous found himself embroiled in yet another embarrassing escapade. It all began as he ambled through the narrow lanes, pondering his next heroic deed, when he stumbled upon Brother Bernard, the gassy monk renowned for his love of baked beans. "Good morrow, brother," Sir Reginald greeted, unaware that a foul wind was brewing. As the two exchanged pleasantries, Squire Hubert, the perpetually clumsy lad, tripped over a wayward chicken and sent his chamber pot, filled to the brim, tumbling toward the unsuspecting duo. In a split second, chaos erupted. The pot shattered, sending a cascade of its dubious contents splattering everywhere, including the very robes of Brother Bernard, who was simultaneously attempting to hold his nose and maintain his dignity. "By the saints! A foul fate has befallen us," Sir Reginald exclaimed, his face a mixture of horror and barely contained laughter. The villagers, drawn by the commotion, gathered round, their laughter ringing through the air like a merry tune. They had witnessed a spectacle of medieval mishap, where the lack of privacy in the garderobe system became all too evident. As the crowd roared, Sir Reginald couldn't help but chuckle. After all, in a time when waste disposal meant hurling excrement into the streets, One must find humor in the absurdity of life. And so, amid the laughter and the lingering scent of misfortune, the villagers learned an invaluable lesson. Sometimes, the best remedy for the trials of medieval living is a hearty laugh and a good story to share. Preferably far from the garderobe. Eavesdropping on the unmentionable. In the heart of the bustling medieval village, the sun cast its golden rays over thatched roofs, illuminating the vibrant chaos of daily life. However, the idyllic scene had a rather unsightly underbelly, one that involved chamber pots, clumsy escapades, and more than a hint of scandal. At the forefront of this tumultuous tableau was Lord Percival, a nobleman who had a particular penchant for prying into the affairs of others. One fine morning, as the village was awakening to the scent of freshly baked bread, Lord Percival decided to take his morning stroll. He sported a tunic so lavishly embroidered that one might confuse him for a walking tapestry. With a nose that twitched at the slightest whiff of mischief, he ambled along the cobblestone path, keen to gather some wayward gossip. Little did he know, today's escapade would involve a rather embarrassing misunderstanding regarding the village's sanitation practices. Ah, what a lovely day to inquire about the state of affairs, he declared to no one in particular. As he strolled along, his attention was caught by the raucous laughter emanating from the nearby tavern, the Wandering Wyvern. Peeking through the open door, he spotted a group of villagers huddled together, their faces lit by the flickering candlelight. "Pray tell, what news do you have?" he asked, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Lord Percival," chimed in old man Barnaby, the village's unofficial gossip monger. "It's about the new waste disposal laws. There's a rumor that the king is considering fining anyone who throws waste into the streets." "Is that so?" Percival exclaimed, his interest piqued. "How utterly scandalous. But wait, what are we to do when the chamber pots overflow? Surely, we can't be expected to keep such matters indoors." As the villagers laughed, Percival turned away, determined to delve deeper into the matter. He had already encountered his fair share of chamberpot incidents. Like the time a clumsy squire named Reginald mistook a pot for a helmet during a mock battle, resulting in a splatter that sent the entire village into fits of laughter. Today, however, he was on a mission for more profound revelations. Meanwhile, in the depths of the village's only privy, Brother Alaric, a monk with digestive issues that could rival the local cow's output, was pondering his fate. The garderobe, a quaint little structure that jutted out over a stream, was supposed to offer him privacy. Unfortunately, the walls were so thin that even the most whispered prayer could be overheard by the likes of Lord Percival, who was now lurking nearby. "Dear Lord, if you can hear me," Brother Alaric murmured, "please spare me from the embarrassment of being overheard during my most vulnerable moments." Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside, causing him to jump. "What was that?" Lord Percival said, peering over the edge of the garderobe. "Alaric, are you all right in there?" Yes, quite all right," Brother Alaric stammered, his face as red as the beets from the market. "Just, contemplating the virtues of sanitation." Percival's curiosity was piqued. "Sanitation, you say? Does that mean you're pondering the laws against waste disposal?" His eyes gleamed with glee at the prospect of a scandal brewing beneath the surface. "The laws?" Alaric squeaked, trying desperately to maintain his dignity. "Why, yes. Very important laws." As he spoke, the scent of his recent endeavors wafted through the air, mingling with the morning breeze. Before he could clarify, Percival, with a dramatic flourish, proclaimed, "I shall summon the villagers. We need to discuss the ramifications of such laws." Little did he know, the villagers had already gathered, ready to hear the latest scandal. As the crowd formed, a commotion ensued when Reginald, the clumsy squire, stumbled into the scene, his own chamber pot sloshing dangerously in his grasp. "Lord Percival, I heard there's a discussion about laws," he yelled, just as the contents of his pot spilled over, dousing a few unfortunate souls in the vicinity. Laughter erupted as the nobleman, with a flourish worthy of a stage actor, declared, "Indeed. A matter of great importance. What shall we do about the waste on our streets?" The villagers, now in stitches over Reginald's misfortune, began to debate vociferously, each claiming their right to dispose of waste as they saw fit. And thus, amidst a cacophony of opinions and the occasional splatter of chamberpot contents, the villagers learned that while laws might soon be looming over their heads, the true fun lay not in waste disposal, but in the camaraderie and hilarity that came with their shared experiences. In medieval times, it turned out, the only thing more pungent than the air was the laughter that accompanied it. In the heart of a bustling medieval village, where the scent of unwashed bodies mingled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, there stood a notorious garderobe. It was a creaky wooden contraption perched over a foul-smelling pit. A place where nobles and peasants alike ventured with a mix of urgency and trepidation. Sir Reginald, the rotund knight with a penchant for lavish feasts, found himself in a particularly precarious situation. Clad in armor that clinked like a rickety cart, he waddled toward the garderobe, desperately hoping to avoid another bout of his infamous digestive disasters. Meanwhile, Brother Bernard, a monk famous for his insatiable love of beans, was already stationed inside, blissfully unaware that his rather melodious flatulence had drawn the ire of Lady Edwina, a noblewoman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper nose. As Sir Reginald approached, he overheard her shrill exclamations of horror. "What kind of foul sorcery is this? A demon unleashed upon us," she cried, fanning herself dramatically. But the real chaos erupted when Squire Bertie, a bumbling lad with more enthusiasm than grace, stumbled upon the scene. In an effort to impress Lady Edwina, he miscalculated his footing and sent a chamberpot tumbling. The contents, a cascade of yesterday's stew and questionable remnants, splashed in all directions, resulting in a cacophony of shrieks and laughter. Sir Reginald, who had just entered the garderobe, found himself trapped between a noblewoman's disdain and a monk's giggles, all while balancing the precarious situation of his own impending crisis. In that moment of utter chaos, with waste flying and indignation swirling, the villagers learned something profound. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, the most humorous tales often sprouted from the most unfortunate circumstances. And as they cleaned up the mess, laughter echoed through the streets, proving that even amidst the stench of the past, humanity's spirit remains unblemished. A monk's digestive dilemma. Monastic madness. A monk's digestive dilemma. In the quaint village of Eldershire, where the sun-dappled streets thrummed with the lively chatter of townsfolk, the notion of personal privacy was as foreign as a dragon in the meadows. Here, the medieval toilet, or garderobe, was less a sanctuary and more a stage for comedy, tragedy, and questionable hygiene practices. Brother Elric, a monk of mild temperament but rather unfortunate constitution, found himself in a particularly precarious situation. After indulging in a generous helping of the abbey's famous porridge, an unholy concoction of oats and what could only be described as mystery meat, his stomach churned like a blacksmith's forge. It was a dire hour, and the call of nature echoed ominously in the stone corridors of St. Benedict's Abbey. "By the saints," he muttered, clutching his belly like a sailor clings to a sinking ship. The garderobe, situated at the end of a dimly lit hall and directly above the village's main thoroughfare, was his only hope for relief. But as he approached, he could hear the unmistakable sound of his fellow monks engaged in a heated debate about the merits of fasting versus feasting. An unholy distraction from his immediate needs. "Brother Alaric, I tell you, eating beans is an affront to God," shouted Brother Oswin, his voice booming like a bell at matins. "Only if you eat them in excess, dear brother." Alaric retorted, "Moderation is key. Perhaps you should try it sometime." Elric sighed. A debate about beans and their divine implications was hardly conducive to his urgent predicament. Yet, the moment he stepped into the garderobe, he was greeted by a sight that would send even the most devout monk into fits of laughter, or horror. The garderobe was nothing more than a crude wooden seat positioned over a pit, with a view straight down into the muck that had been accumulating for weeks. Above him hung a tattered curtain, which did little to preserve his dignity but offered the illusion of privacy. As he settled himself, he couldn't help but notice the chamber pot, which had long since overflowed. A silent testament to the previous occupant's lack of foresight, or perhaps, a lack of a proper chamber pot altogether. Just as Elric began to find solace in his moment of desperation, a clattering sound erupted from the hall. In rushed Squire Percival, a young man whose coordination was rivaled only by that of a newborn foal. "Brother Elric." "I need." "Not now, Percival," Elric shouted, a mixture of urgency and embarrassment in his voice. But it was too late. The squire, in his eagerness to assist, had flung open the curtain, revealing Elric in all his, vulnerability. "Oh. Forgive me, brother," Percival yelped, his face turning as red as the ripe apples in the orchard. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet and landing unceremoniously in a pile of hay. Much to the amusement of a passing noblewoman who looked on with a bemused expression. "Is this how monks seek enlightenment?" she called out, a mischievous grin dancing on her lips. Ignoring her jibe, Elric grunted as he tried to maintain some semblance of decorum, but the unfortunate combination of his digestive distress and Percival's clumsiness led to a rather explosive occurrence that echoed through the stone walls of the abbey. "Oh dear!" Elric exclaimed, his eyes wide with embarrassment. "This is hardly what I envisioned for my next confession." Meanwhile, the noblewoman couldn't help but cackle. "I daresay this is the most entertaining sermon I've witnessed in ages." As the squire scrambled to regain his dignity and the noblewoman continued to chuckle, Elric finally managed to complete his business. He emerged from the garderobe with a mixture of relief and shame, his cheeks flushed as he faced the laughter of both the noblewoman and his fellow monks, now gathered outside. "Next time, perhaps I'll choose a more secluded spot for my meditations," he mused aloud, earning a hearty laugh from the crowd. And so, amidst the chaos of medieval sanitation, with its lack of privacy and questionable waste disposal practices, Brother Elric learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, it's best to laugh at life's little embarrassments, even if they come at the most inconvenient of times. In the end, it wasn't just the contents of the garderobe that stank, but also the hilarious misunderstandings and quirky characters that filled the village streets, proving that in Eldershire, laughter was the best remedy for any digestive dilemma. In the heart of Wobbleshire, where the stench of uncollected waste mingled with the scent of freshly baked bread, Sir Reginald found himself in a rather precarious situation. The local garderobe, a wooden shack perched precariously over a muddy ditch, was the only option for those with pressing needs. With no doors to shield one's modesty, privacy was as scarce as a clean chamber pot. On this fateful day, Reginald, still chuckling from his encounter with Brother Bernard, waddled toward the garderobe, only to be interrupted by Squire Hubert, who, in a fit of clumsiness, stumbled and sent a thundering thump through the air as a chamber pot met its unfortunate demise. The sound echoed like an announcement of doom, causing Reginald to pause mid-step and glance back at the scene, just in time to see a waft of the infamous waste cloud billow forth. "By the heavens, Hubert! Was that a pot or a cannon?" Reginald quipped, stifling laughter as he stepped gingerly around the wreckage. As he entered the garderobe, the chaos continued. Lady Edwina, ever the nosy noblewoman, barged in, her curiosity outweighing her decorum. "Reginald, have you heard the latest gossip?" she began, oblivious to the fact that they were sharing a toilet. "Not now, Edwina. This is hardly the time for chit-chat," he replied, his face a mixture of amusement and urgency. Just then, Brother Bernard ambled in, clutching his belly, muttering about the ill effects of last night's feast. "I fear the eels have risen against me," he exclaimed, just as a resounding crash echoed from the adjacent chamber. where Hubert had attempted to retrieve another pot. In that moment, laughter erupted, mingling with the smell of unmentionable horrors. It was then that Reginald realized. Though the medieval toilet was a sight of embarrassment and chaos, it also brought forth a camaraderie among those who dared to venture near it. And thus, in the midst of their laughter, they learned that even in the most foul and unsightly of circumstances, humor had a way of flushing away their troubles, if only temporarily, from castle to cesspit. Waste disposal. From castle to cesspit. In the bustling heart of Eldershire, where the cobblestones glistened with a sheen of mystery, or perhaps something less savory, the townsfolk engaged in their daily rituals of commerce, gossip, and, most notably, waste disposal. It was a time when the concept of personal privacy existed as a mere whisper in the wind, especially when it came to the subject of toilets. The very idea of a private chamber was a luxury reserved for the most opulent of nobles, while the rest of the lot relied on the ancient art of squatting in public view, much to the delight, or dismay, of passers-by. As the sun rose over the castle of Eldershire, its proud stone walls adorned with ivy, Lady Beatrice, the noble matron known for her keen interest in the affairs of her subjects, found herself in a rather peculiar situation. With a penchant for gossip that rivaled even the most loquacious of magpies, she decided to inspect the latest addition to her castle, a new garderobe. This was not merely a place to relieve oneself. It was a throne of sorts, elevated above the murky cesspit below. "Pray tell, where do you keep the chamber pots?" she inquired, her eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and mischief. As she approached the squire, a bumbling fellow named Cedric who had a tendency to trip over his own feet. "Ah, milady. The chamber pots are, quite near," Cedric stammered, nearly losing his balance as he gestured toward a rickety stack of pots teetering precariously by the wall. "Near? Or here?" Lady Beatrice exclaimed, and before Cedric could comprehend the question, she had already decided to demonstrate her newfound knowledge of waste disposal etiquette. With a flourish, she lifted her skirts, much to the horror of a passing monk whose own digestive issues had him scuttling to the nearest bush. "By the saints!" he cried, "not here, my lady." But alas, the urgency of nature took precedence, and before anyone could intervene, Lady Beatrice had taken her place atop the garderobe, her noble demeanor utterly incongruous with the situation. Cedric, caught between admiration and sheer panic, watched as the noblewoman, in her moment of triumph, inadvertently sent a rather sizable offering tumbling into the cesspit below. "Did you hear that?" a nearby peasant exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That sounded like a cow." Meanwhile, the monk, now hidden behind the bush, could only shake his head in despair. "Oh, what a world where nobles seem to have no sense of decorum," he muttered, wishing for a more modest existence where the only thing he had to worry about was the occasional flatulence during prayer. As word of Lady Beatrice's unfortunate debacle spread through Eldershire like wildfire, it reached the ears of Sir Reginald, the pompous knight known for his overly grandiose tales of valor. He swaggered into the courtyard, only to find the townsfolk in uproarious laughter. "What seems to be the matter?" he inquired, adjusting his helmet which was slightly askew. "Lady Beatrice has just declared war on the cesspit," a baker's apprentice shouted, pointing toward the garderobe. "War on the cesspit? Ha! I've faced dragons and bandits, but I've never fought against the likes of waste," Sir Reginald proclaimed, raising his sword dramatically, oblivious to the fact that the only thing he needed to battle was his own sense of dignity. As the day wore on, the villagers of Eldershire found themselves embroiled in a series of humorous misunderstandings regarding waste disposal. The common belief that throwing waste into the streets was permissible was only exacerbated by Sir Reginald's misguided notions of knightly honor. "To the castle with you," he declared, much to the confusion of a passing merchant holding a basket of ripe apples, now tainted with the remnants of the noble's earlier folly. Thus, the quaint village of Eldershire, with its charmingly chaotic approach to sanitation, found itself in a delightful tableau of laughter, lessons, and the occasional misplaced chamber pot. For in the Middle Ages, where the art of waste disposal was a veritable dance of folly, the true treasure was not merely in the absence of waste, but in the camaraderie and hilarity that arose from the most unexpected of situations. And perhaps, just perhaps, the townsfolk would one day learn to keep their waste, and their laughter, within more appropriate bounds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Wobbleshire, Sir Reginald adjusted his tunic and prepared for an evening of feasting. Little did he know that his night would take a most unexpected turn, all thanks to the village's notorious Garderobe. This charming yet dubious facility stood proudly, if not precariously, at the edge of the castle courtyard, its scent wafting through the air like a particularly uninvited guest. With all the grace of a duck on ice, Bertie, Sir Reginald's hapless squire, approached the Garderobe, clutching a chamber pot as if it were the Holy Grail. "My lord, I believe I shall demonstrate the art of efficient waste disposal," he declared, puffing out his chest. Just then, Brother Bernard, the village monk with an insatiable appetite for beans, waddled by, his face a mask of discomfort. "Good sir, do you require assistance?" Sir Reginald inquired, trying to suppress a grin. "Or perhaps a remedy for your digestive tribulations?" Before Bernard could respond, Hubert, the most clumsy of all servants, stumbled into the scene. With a resounding crash, the chamber pot flew from Bertie's hands, launching its contents into the air like a poorly timed firework. The village erupted into laughter as the flying waste rained down, splattering the unsuspecting Bernard, who let out a yelp that could wake the dead. In that moment, amidst the chaos and laughter, Sir Reginald realized that even in the most trying times of medieval sanitation, where privacy was as scarce as a clean linen, humor prevailed. After all, when life gives you a chamber pot, sometimes it's best to just laugh it off. With a hearty chuckle, they all learned that in the grand tapestry of life, a little laughter could truly wash away the messiest of situations. When cleanliness was next to godliness, or not, in the bustling heart of Eldershire, where the cobblestones glistened with a sheen of mystery, or perhaps something less savory, the townsfolk engaged in their daily rituals amidst the fragrant wafts of fresh bread and the occasional, shall we say, earthy aromas wafting from the nearby Garderobe. It was a time when public hygiene was as elusive as a knight's honor after a few tankards of ale. In this peculiar town, the noble Sir Reginald, known for his propensity to meddle in affairs that were none of his business, had taken it upon himself to uphold cleanliness in Eldershire. However, his methods were as questionable as the hygiene practices of the townsfolk. One sunny afternoon, he donned his most resplendent doublet and strode through the market, determined to enforce a new decree: no more waste upon the streets. As he strutted, he encountered a clumsy squire named Alistair, who, despite his best intentions, often found himself in precarious situations. Today, he was balancing a chamber pot that seemed to have a mind of its own. "Alistair, what on earth are you doing?" Sir Reginald bellowed, his voice booming like a church bell on Sunday. My lord," Alistair stammered, swaying dangerously as he attempted to keep the pot upright. "I'm just, disposing of the waste, as you commanded." "Disposing? Is that what you call flinging it into the gutter?" Sir Reginald glared, his nose crinkling at the stench. "You're supposed to take it to the cesspit, not turn the street into a public latrine." "But my lord, the cesspit is a bit far," Alistair whined, his balance faltering as a stray cat darted past, causing him to leap sideways and spill the contents of the chamber pot onto the cobblestones. A chorus of horrified gasps erupted from the gathered crowd. In the midst of the chaos, Brother Cedric, a monk suffering from chronic digestive issues, ambled by. The poor man had a singular focus that day: to procure a loaf of bread before the next bout of intestinal distress struck. Upon witnessing the spectacle, he raised an eyebrow. Good heavens, what manner of excremental explosion is this? He exclaimed, clutching his rosary as if it could ward off the foulness. Brother, it's merely a slight mishap, Sir Reginald replied, trying to maintain his composure. Alistair here is, well, let's say he has a unique approach to hygiene. Indeed, my lord, Brother Cedric replied, scrunching his nose. Perhaps we ought to remind the good people of Eldershire that cleanliness is next to godliness, even if it requires a bit more effort than tossing waste willy-nilly. Just then, Lady Beatrice, a nosy noblewoman with an insatiable curiosity, joined the fray, her eyes wide with intrigue. Oh, how delightful! I do love a good story about waste management, she declared, oblivious to the grim scene before her. What laws are we instituting to ensure cleanliness in our fair town? Sir Reginald, seizing the moment to assert his authority, announced, I hereby decree that henceforth, anyone caught throwing waste on the street shall face the wrath of the town's finest, an afternoon of mucking out the royal stables. The townsfolk murmured amongst themselves, some chuckling at the absurdity of it all. Alistair, still red-faced, mumbled, perhaps I should just stick to the garderobe system. At least there, I could enjoy a bit of privacy while I relieve myself. Privacy? Lady Beatrice giggled. In a garderobe? My dear boy, privacy is a luxury of the wealthy. You should be grateful for the company of your fellow man. As the sun dipped low and the laughter echoed through the streets, the townsfolk embraced the chaos of their medieval lives, where the lines between dignity and disaster were often blurred. In Eldershire, the lesson was clear. While cleanliness may be next to godliness, it was often overshadowed by the very human experience of navigating the whims of waste in a world that seemed all too eager to remind them of their baser instincts. And so, they continued on, forging the path of history, one chamber pot at a time. As the sun dipped low behind the thatched roofs of Wobbleshire, Sir Reginald, clad in his finest tunic, found himself wandering the winding path towards the village garderobe. An ornate structure that promised both relief and a good dose of mortification. Little did he know, his evening would unravel into a tapestry of comedic chaos. Upon entering, Reginald was greeted by the unmistakable scent of, well, let's just say it was an acquired taste. The garderobe, an open-air affair perched precariously above the village, offered little in the way of decorum. Just as he settled himself upon the rather precarious seat, the unmistakable sound of clattering echoed through the air. Hubert, his clumsy squire, had tripped over a chamber pot, sending it tumbling down the wooden stairs with a resounding crash. By the heavens! Reginald exclaimed, narrowly avoiding a splash of what was once a very private affair. At that moment, Brother Bernard, the ever-hungry monk with a penchant for beans, appeared, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding. Sir Reginald. Have you seen my, he began, only to be interrupted by the sight of Hubert, who had now taken to flailing about like a fish out of water, desperately trying to right the overturned pot. Laughter erupted from the villagers below, who had gathered to witness this odd spectacle. Is this a nobleman or a jester? One cheeky peasant quipped, earning a round of chuckles. Amidst the cacophony, Reginald, finding solace in humor, bellowed, Fear not, my good people. This is merely a demonstration of the perils of medieval sanitation. As the evening wore on, the scene became a merry blend of misunderstanding and misadventure. With every slip and tumble, the noble and his squire became unlikely comedians, reminding everyone that even in the most unsavory circumstances, laughter was the true remedy for life's little messes. And so, in the heart of Wobbleshire, where waste disposal was an art form and privacy was but a distant dream, the villagers found joy in the absurdity of their everyday lives, proving that sometimes the best way to cope with a stinky situation is to embrace it with a hearty laugh. Lessons learned from medieval lavatories. In the heart of Eldershire, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the cobblestones, which, let's be honest, were less a testament to cleanliness and more of a tribute to the town's robust digestive habits. It was there, amidst the fragrant wafts of questionable origin, that our tale unfolds. One that would shine a light on the peculiarities of medieval sanitation. As dawn broke, Sir Reginald, a rather pompous nobleman with a penchant for excessive verbosity, was preparing for his morning routine. His chamber pot, a ceramic relic adorned with a questionable floral pattern, sat beside his bed like a loyal steed. Little did he know, today would not be just another day of indulgent breakfasts and self-aggrandizing speeches. No, today would be a lesson in humility and hygiene. As he shuffled to the garderobe, an open-air toilet perched precariously over the castle wall, he encountered Barnaby, his clumsy squire. Barnaby, with his usual grace reminiscent of a startled goose, managed to trip over his own feet, sending his own chamber pot flying like a projectile. It soared through the air, an impressive arc of ceramic disaster. "Watch out below," shouted Barnaby, only to realize too late that the village was bustling with life beneath him. The pot landed squarely on the head of Brother Bernard, a monk known for his delicate constitution and rather unfortunate digestive issues. "By the saints!" Brother Bernard exclaimed, his face a portrait of shock and horror. "This is neither the time nor the place for such celestial encounters." As the villagers erupted in laughter, Sir Reginald, oblivious to the chaos around him, pushed open the door to the garderobe, only to be greeted by the pungent aroma of yesterday's regrets. The system was simple. A wooden seat with a hole, allowing waste to drop into the moat below. A charming idea until one considered the effects of medieval diets on the local water supply. Reginald settled himself onto the seat, blissfully unaware of the potential hazards of his throne. Just as he began to contemplate the day's agenda, a loud splash echoed from below. A fish, apparently more curious than wise, had leapt into the moat, only to find itself on the receiving end of a rather unexpected shower of refuse. "Ah! Nature's way of reminding us of our place in the world," he mused, adjusting his tunic with an air of superiority, a sentiment quickly quashed by the sight of a rat peering up at him from the shadows. Meanwhile, Barnaby was still trying to salvage his dignity. "I swear, it was an accident," he protested, attempting to flee the scene but tripping over a stray bucket that had been left too close to the edge of the walkway. The bucket tipped, spilling its contents, a concoction of remnants from last night's feast, right onto Reginald's polished boots. "By the crown!" Reginald shouted, leaping up in horror. "You've ruined my finest footwear." "Forgive me, my lord," cried Barnaby, now attempting to wipe the goo from Reginald's shoes with his own tunic, which only resulted in a comedic wrestling match between the two. As the scene unfolded, the townsfolk watched with amusement, their laughter mingling with the morning air. It seemed that even in a time of questionable sanitation practices, camaraderie was forged in the fires of shared misfortune. And perhaps a little waste. Amidst the chaos, a wise old woman, known as Granny Ethel, stood by with arms crossed and a smirk. "Back in my day," she called out, "we had laws against throwing waste in the streets. If only you lot could learn a thing or two from the past." Her words hung in the air, a reminder that while the Middle Ages may have been infamous for their lack of hygiene, they were also rife with humor and humanity. In the end, as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the cobblestones that bore witness to this morning's debacle, one lesson rang clear. Even amidst the most unsanitary circumstances, laughter was the best sanitation of all. The townsfolk dispersed, their spirits lightened, and Sir Reginald, still wiping his shoes, pondered the day ahead. Perhaps a little less indulgent and a bit more respectful of the garderobes of Eldershire. After all, the throne of cleanliness might just be a little closer to godliness than he'd thought. In the bustling village of Wobbleshire, where the air was thick with the scent of hay, livestock, and the occasional waft of something decidedly less pleasant, our hero, Sir Reginald, faced the daily trials of medieval sanitation with a mix of bravado and trepidation. Today, as he donned his finest tunic, He prepared for an encounter with the infamous Garderobe, a wooden contraption that doubled as both a toilet and a delightful conversation spot for the village's most eccentric residents. As he approached the Garderobe, Sir Reginald was greeted by Brother Bernard, the monk with an insatiable appetite for beans, whose mere presence was enough to cause the most robust of stomachs to churn. "Ah, Sir Reginald. Care for a chat whilst we dispose of our burdens?" Bernard inquired cheerfully, oblivious to the potential double entendre. But before Sir Reginald could respond, the clumsy Squire Hubert stumbled forth, his chamber pot teetering perilously in his hands. With a dramatic flourish, he lost his grip, sending a cascade of human waste splattering across the cobblestones. The village erupted into chaos. Lady Edwina shrieked as she became an unwitting target of the unfortunate incident, while Brother Elmer, with his delicate constitution, fainted dead away. In the midst of the uproar, Sir Reginald, ever the gallant knight, attempted to restore order. "Fear not, dear villagers. This is merely a demonstration of the perils of poor chamber pot handling," he declared, though his voice was drowned out by laughter and the frantic attempts to clean up the mess. As the sun began to set, the laughter echoed through the village, a reminder that even in the most unsavory of situations, camaraderie and humor can prevail. Wobbleshire, with all its quirks and quibbles, would endure, united by the shared absurdity of their medieval existence, where privacy was but a distant dream and every trip to the Garderobe promised an adventure, and perhaps a splash or two.